again.
Yeah, we're not going to reference the thing that happened.
We are live.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to BHIS Talking About News. We got a smaller group here today. It's what we call intimate. It's kind of like hanging out in my basement level intimate. Maybe a little bit creepy, but that's okay. And
John,
yes,
why did you invite me here today?
Yeah, why did I invite you here today? And yes, I do have a lot of skis behind me if people bring that up in the comments. And no, I am very, very, very bad at doing any wiring in my open ceiling basement. But the joke that we used to say all the time at BHIS, we don't have ceilings. That's how we keep our costs low. So let's go ahead. Let's kick off the intro music. Let's get started. Today we'll be talking about Mimecast being hacked. We'll be talking about vaccine data being hacked. We'll be talking about Microsoft and Linux BFFs. And then we're going to be talking about a dark web transactional marketplace going down. All coming up next.
All right.
All right. Let's get started. Let's talk about that Mimecast thing. Ryan, can you bring that up? Now, so there's a lot of companies that are implementing security and they're layering it on top of things like Office 365. And one of the big concerns that I think has been showing up in the industry and has been popping up more and more and more is, who do we actually trust? So if you look at the SolarWinds hack, right? We all trusted SolarWinds and, put it in the middle of our network, right, with some of the most sensitive access. And dang, if it didn't get hacked, and then that had some really bad repercussions for the security industry as a whole. Well, there's another story that's out right now where Mimecast, who actually works with securing Office 365 instances, one of their certificates, one of their supply chain certificates, was hacked. We're not getting a lot of details right now from Mimecast. But basically, the way Mimecast works whenever it's actually hooked into your Office 365 environment is it has a tremendous amount of access to Mimecast customers' email. And by a tremendous amount, I mean like all of it. So with this particular breach, Mimecast is saying 10% of their total customers have been compromised. That's about 3,600 organizations. And this isn't something that could just be fixed right away. Very similar to the SolarWinds hack. You can't just patch it, fix it, and walk away. If Mimecast has to go through and reissue all of its certificates, what Microsoft is forcing them to do, that is a significant work item. And right now they expect that work item is going to take them until about the 16th of this month to start purging the rest of those certificates out that were hacked by the hackers. So if you're not that technical, the point of what we're going to be talking about here in a second is we trust certain vendors. We put these vendors at the heart of our security, and it really creates a scenario where we're back to having single points of failure. And many of these single points of failure are just necessary for the way that we actually have to work in the IT industry as a whole. But this is yet another reminder of just how bad this can be. So Ralph, I wanted to get your opinion on this. What do you think of this Mimecast hack?
I think it's pretty interesting. I know that there have been some other hacks on certificate registrars or anyone else who's issuing certificates, and it does tend to. And I think a couple of those have actually ended up pretty much going out of business too, especially when they weren't doing their due diligence. This is not that case, right? This is actually like them getting compromised and then going from there and spreading. So I mean, it's slightly different, but still kind of a mess to clean up, And I also think it's interesting too on Office 365. I actually read another article today about some CVEs in Office 365 and actually getting remote code execution on Exchange in Office 365. And in fact, them going through the process of submitting these CVEs, these are pretty recent CVEs, and actually them patching it 4 times as they came out with different ways to compromise it the same way. And my point of that,
we've seen that a number of times already from Microsoft, where there's a vulnerability, they patch it, they didn't patch it completely, they had to patch it again. Is that just in the news more, or are you kind of getting a feeling like maybe they might be slipping a little bit with some of their patches QA?
I don't know. And like the researcher had told them like, hey, you need to focus more on this. And it's kind of like they came back around and it was like 4 rounds of going through. And I guess my point of bringing that story up as it relates to Office 365 and Mimecast is that as we move to the cloud, as we move to more giving away this, kind of ownership piece, we lose some of that control in the sense of not a patch, okay? Not, we're just relying on the vendor to take onus of security. And that's, for most organizations, that's something that they happily are excited about. But don't be surprised if you are a victim of kind of a broader attack, because now it affects a lot more people than it possibly would have before, right? So,
but that's actually kind of a good thing, right? I mean, look, I always look at it from the news story narrative, right? So if one of Mimecast's customers gets hacked and their data gets breached, right? The news story isn't necessarily company X got hacked, right?
Mhm.
The news story is they were a victim of this Mimecast breach. And I think that same thing applies whenever you're talking about Google and Office 365.
Yep.
And, if we talk about, like, let's say there is an exploit that exists for everybody in Office 365, which there are those vulnerabilities that exist, no question, right?
Yep.
If that gets hit, that's almost not, I don't want to say it's not your responsibility, but it kind of is, right? Like, you can kind of look at it and say, well, Microsoft screwed up or Mimecast screwed up. And there's a little bit of being able to sleep at night because of that too.
Yeah, I mean, you're just shifting the responsibility, which in turn means shifting that blame on, what, I didn't mess up. I mean, my vendor, obviously, I expected better of them.
Yeah.
So.
And then you're just a victim. And that's like those companies that decide to go it alone. And we have listeners of our webcasts and stuff all the time that are like, I don't, oh God, of course the phone has to ring. There are, it's the news. People are like, hey, why aren't you talking about certain topics? No. But you still have companies out there, and you have Infosec professionals that say, well, I don't trust it. The cloud is somebody else's computer. I'm going to build it from the ground up. If you're looking at complexity, the complexity of doing that is probably beyond most organizations' capabilities to do. And ultimately, if you're doing that, you're taking on that responsibility on your own shoulders. And that's the terrifying aspect of it.
So this reminds me of one of my favorite talks I ever saw at a conference was the adventures of running your own email server, like your own email server, and all the things. Yeah, every single aspect of running your own email server just teaches you to have someone else run your email server.
That's the lesson. That is the only lesson.
Yeah,
I've personally been down this road of running your own email server, and there's a lot of ins and outs, and and while functional, when you think about all of the work required to just get email and then giving that to someone else, it's just so much easier. And, as a learning experience, I think everyone should go through that if they really want to understand this. But as like something you want to nurture, like growing a garden, it's a bad deal.
Are you saying it's kind of like Infosec algebra? It's like, you've got to, when am I ever going to use this? You may not, but you got to know it. It's really important.
There's pieces to that. There's some pieces to that, especially if you think about phishing, right? I think that if you really want to kind of understand the mechanics of how email works and, more than just sending it and stuff like that, it is kind of interesting. But
I ran an email server from 98 to 2005, and essentially I was a conduit for every single phishing scam or whatever that just completely compromised.
You were an open relay. I get it.
I was sending hundreds of thousands of emails every month, essentially. That's fine.
I can see you talking to management. So, Jason, give us some stats. Well, just so you know, we sent 200,000 emails on average per day last month.
But there's only 3
Great
of
job.
us.
There's only 10 of us, but damn. You're welcome. So it looks like Ryan has the next story up. The world's largest dark web marketplace shutters. This is kind of like the Al-Qaeda number 2. It's like for years they were like the most dangerous job was being the Al-Qaeda number 2. And it seems like now the most dangerous site to have online is to be the world's largest dark web marketplace. You really, as soon as you're number 1, it's just a matter of time before they actually shut you down. So the name of it was a dark market. There was 20 of them that were actually seized. And they arrested an Australian citizen living in Germany. And I know, Ralph, you spent a lot of time, with the gray web and kind of looking through all of these different things. And what do we learn from this? I mean, is there actually a lesson to from this other than kids don't do crime? I mean, what do we need to take from this as a whole?
Here's a weird thing that I take from this, and don't take this the wrong way. I think that this is a problem with centralization, right? If we decentralize some of this, and I'm not necessarily a supporter of this, of crime on the internet, but let's be realistic, okay? This is going.
Wait, hold on. Ralph just said I'm not a supporter, but.
No,
but.
Well, hold on. I do not support it, and okay. I think it's stupid and all kinds of fun stuff. But it is going to exist. It's going to exist. There's nothing. My thought or belief on the system is not going to change that. And that's we're going to see. It's whack-a-mole. That's kind of my thought, and I think as more you whack the mole is probably going to get a little smarter each time. So.
Well, and that's one of the things I'm wondering is, do we actually see the moles getting smarter with this? It seems like a lot of them, set up on dark web or, setting them up under Tor and all these different things. And do you actually see them improving the mechanisms they use to secure and kind of hide themselves? Or whenever you set up a marketplace that's that big and that's that complex, is it just almost impossible to completely hide yourself behind the veil of anonymity?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think it really is impossible to be absolutely hidden. And, there's been tons. I've been to a couple of talks myself where they had OPSEC fails of either these sites or, a people or, doing illegal activities while trying to be anonymous and what they did wrong. And as far as that, and every one of those talks that I kind of hear, I'm like, I mean, the links it takes to really not mess up once, it's very difficult.
Well, and it also gets into this myth of a lot of the people that don't understand IT or IT security very well at all. They talk about, well, I'm going through multiple different proxies, or they're using a browser from Tor that strips all this different JavaScript off of your web browser to reduce the likelihood of you actually being caught. What I think a lot of them don't understand is you can establish like a certain level of perfect anonymity online if you do everything right, but it basically renders your entire experience online to be almost unusable. So if somebody's like, well, we're going to attack this website and we're going to do it through Tor, if you completely cut off all JavaScript, that's like 90% of the website. You aren't going to be successful in attacking that website. You just aren't, unless there's something like keenly stupid that they have for a mistake. So as a user, we're always trying to balance usability and security. And the same thing with attackers and people that are trying to set these things up. You have to make the marketplace usable, and you have to make it secure, and you have to remain anonymous. Those are three things that are usually fighting with each other very hard, and it makes it exceedingly difficult to actually do that successfully as well.
Well, yeah, I may have had these news articles backwards.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I can see the ones. I can see the one that you posted up on the stream. I can see that, and it's fine. It was the one that you had up, man. I just rolled with it. So
the other piece of this is that they are dealing typically in some illicit activity that is not just electronic. Okay, so let's use some examples: selling drugs or other things like that. And so those are all real traces to figure out what's going on. And so that becomes another piece of this where it's harder to keep the OPSEC there. So
absolutely, yeah, Jason.
I just always picture the people in a room that say, you know what we should do? We should create the world's largest dark web marketplace. And then they're like, okay, so we got to secure it, right? Like this is a massive project management thing that has happened here.
And generally, people that get into crime aren't big into project management.
No.
Just from my experience working with law enforcement, no. I've never heard of anybody like, well, we went into this particular gun smuggling ring and, boy, lucky us, they had their Gantt charts up. And, somebody was a Lean Six Sigma black belt on this team, and they had their CMMI level 5 certifications for project. And there's people right now that are like freaking out and crawling underneath their desks and crying. Just that's not how they work, right?
But I have seen the TV show The Ozarks, and so I just imagine they find people who are really smart, who are intelligent, and say, "Would you like to make tons of money?" Like, is that how? Like, is there a dark web marketplace for smart people who are looking to get into crime?
Yes, there's actually a darkwebmonster.com.
Dark Monster.
Dark Monster.
It's Evil Indeed. Are the websites that you should go to.
Evil Indeed.
Yeah, Evil Indeed.
Evil Indeed is my new favorite.
So
it's not .com though; it's .onion, just for everyone. So.
There you go, .onion, evilindeed.onion, and you upload your resume. It's founded by the people from Cambridge Analytica. You got to submit your driver's license and social security number.
You don't have to. They already have that information. You just submit.
Oh, my wings and my wax are melting. But but yeah, that gets into a question of like, crime. I think that a lot of people don't understand how, like, if you're looking at like Eastern European crime, a lot of the people that got into that, they got into that because that was like the only thing that was available to them. Or if you look at African attack groups, right? It's not like they have a lot of job options. And, I think that this is very attractive. It's like, if you're in Africa, it's like, hey, you want an AK-47 and go through the jungle and be part of a civil war? Or I'm just mothballing. We put you in an air-conditioned RV unit, and we have you hack people in the United States. I'm like, I'm taking the RV unit every single time. It's like, well, there you go. So
it pays because it's illegal, right? Let's just be realistic. It's profitable because it's illegal, and that's just kind of how it all works. And but to your point, there are a lot of things like people doing illicit activities that it's like, well, my other choice was like really bad, so I chose this.
And that's generally crime, right? And then you got people like Kim.com. It's like, oh my god, how did that guy end up with that much money from Mega? Crazy.
There's a comment from the listener that says, years ago there was a guy that listed his years of running logistics for a drug smuggling ring on his resume.
Successful drug smuggler. There's a
I don't know if I necessarily put that on my
prison. Yeah.
I do my live streams for job hunting, and I might throw that in.
Yeah, you never know. No, I'm better now. I'm better.
Yeah, I've decided that I wanted to go legit.
Now, I have had a lot of people over the years, though, that approached me at SANS conferences, and they're like, hey, I want to let you know I'm in your class and love what you're talking about here, learning a lot. But I was actually an illegal hacker for years, and I'm wondering, is there a job opening at Black Hills Information Security for pen testing? And it's like, no. People get this myth in their head from Hollywood movies that you're a hacker, and it's like, well, then the FBI is going to hire you. I am absolutely certain that has happened, but that's not going to happen to you if you're listening to the show. Like, you're like, this seems like a career path. Illegal hacking, FBI job. No, that's not how it's going to work.
Maybe that project manager for the dark web operation, they're like, wow, well, you ran a fantastic thing here. Could you consult with us? Like,
you know what? Now that would surprise me less if somebody in the government is like, well, we had this guy that was running Escobar's complete drug ring, and damn, if it wasn't ran really well. And look at us in the government. We run things like, like a bunch of, Keystone cops. Let's bring them in. Let's get some Gantt charts in this now.
Gantt charts. So, we can fix everything. Fix everything with a Gantt chart. Ryan, can we bring up the Pfizer data leak?
Let me try. I think
the threat post hackers leak Pfizer COVID-19 data.
I think I got the right one.
Okay, cool. So I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, but like COVID trial data was spread to a lot of different organizations in the United States and Europe and in Asia. And looks like EMA, one of their organizations, European Medicines Agency, they basically broke in and they were able to pull in a bunch of data associated with the COVID-19 vaccinations. And part of me, this sounds horrible, but they're like, yes, they stole the vaccine data, and now they've stolen it and spread it over the internet. Now anyone can make the vaccine. It's like, good. That's horrible, right? Because companies put a lot of money into that. But I think that what this highlights is that level of industrial espionage. Whenever you have something like a COVID-19 vaccination, if you're defending that in your network, you better bring your A game. And we have a ton of customers at BHIS. Like we had one 2 weeks ago. And we were looking at their overall security posture, and it's like you are absolutely going to be a target for Russians and the Chinese, and you have out-of-date software, you don't have very good user awareness to phishing, and like their whole entire security architecture was a train wreck, and they would be considered like a critical infrastructure type company. And kind of the point of this is, and we do a lot of security assessments. Once again, if you're working with something that's really sensitive, don't be delusional and think they're not going to find you and come after you. They absolutely are. And we hear customers all the time that are like, what would anybody want with my company? We've got patents for concrete. It's like they absolutely want that. So it's just that industrial espionage angle is something that I don't think enough people think about. Ralph, your take on that?
Yeah, I mean it's the big thing, especially when we think like a broader scope. Okay, so like not Bitcoin or not what do you call it, ransomware, like not ransomware outside of this, like bigger, like taking this picture bigger, and also other countries. We're starting to see that more and more too, and maybe more and more in the light as opposed to in the dark, where we're not finding out about these things or companies aren't reporting it because they're getting so big that we just can't avoid them. But yeah.
Well, and I think that there's things like when you're talking about the COVID-19 data, it's very hard to just kind of sweep that under the rug. If you're a corporation that has a better light bulb, you get hacked. It's like, well, we just won't talk about it. But no, it's very tough. Go ahead.
And outside of the COVID-19, which is a big one too, but like to your point of like a better light bulb, of course, a country like China, for example, would love to steal that and just start making that thing. It helps them as a country continue to grow without having to actually create. They don't have to pay for it, and they just get to do that. And so, yeah, why not?
And I think we've talked about it on the show before. We don't know if China's the one that actually got the COVID data, but China is great at copycat, right? They steal the data and then they can replicate that. I mean, the pictures of here's a US ship, here's a Chinese ship, they look identical, or their planes look identical. It's like, they have a logo or something that says totally not an F-22 Raptor. It's like, but look at the amount of time and effort that goes into R&D and the money. And if an organization can basically cut right to the front of that line and cheat, why wouldn't you do that if there was very little likelihood that there would be legal repercussions for it? So.
Well, yeah, the government totally overpays for R&D. So, but even still, they spend a ton of money to build these things that have all these. It's just, and they can steal that. That's just free money for them when they get the designs. So.
Yep.
So, John, one of the things that you mentioned is like this company went from, Pfizer's well known, but all of a sudden they became super important. And it's almost like the bands that, like all of a sudden they get a one-hit wonder, and they go from being like this band that playing this little like back end just like bar, and now they're like in the world and they don't know how to function yet.
Yeah.
They're like, geez.
Nirvana is a great example of that. So.
Yeah. And so the security team, like if you're on a security team and you're like, we're just this, it could one day you could become incredibly important. Like the security team at Zoom, I don't think they were expecting what they were going to have to do this year. And all of a sudden they had to do it and just ramp it up and hire people and bring people into a culture. Like it's the human factor in all these things. All of a sudden.
Well, it is, I think that's a great point, but you'll also be judged harsher. Like, remember there was security things. It's like, well, if somebody gets a hold of your link, they can jump into your Zoom meeting, and what is Zoom going to do to stop this? I could just see the security engineers. It's like, so you published the link to your meeting, you didn't put a password, and people are jumping onto your meeting and showing various parts of their anatomy. What part of this is our fault? It's kind of hard, but you're going to be underneath that microscope, right? And it's definitely going to have that level of visibility. But Jason, working with a lot of companies that are small companies that are kind of in the process of exploding, and we start doing security stuff for them, right? There's this kind of mindset that sinks in with companies that are in the startup mode or they go IPO, where they're untouchable, they're bulletproof, right? So you go in and you're like, look, your security is ugly. Like your core network switch is a freaking Linksys switch from Walmart, and that's bad for a variety of different reasons. And we had customers that'll say things like, well, we're generating a new paradigm shift in the way that people think about IT and all these different things, and they start believing their own bullshit. And I think that that's very easy for executives to ignore their IT staff, to ignore what security professionals are telling them, to somehow believe that they're going to not be hacked, because why would the attackers ever come after them? And they're always surprised when the attacks actually come through.
So that does sound like a one-hit wonder band right there.
It sounds exactly like a one-hit wonder band. I've been following the lead singer and bass player for BHIS. He's been fantastic on Twitter, just telling all kinds of stories about the 90s and when him and Matchbox 20 or 5. It was Matchbox 20, wasn't it?
Matchbox 20, yeah.
Yeah. And they were touring together. It's great. If you want to check it out, it's the bass player from BHIS. It's pretty good. So that's what I got for news stories. Do we have any comments or questions from the stream?
Not much. Someone likes my T-shirt, so thanks. Go He-Man.
I like your T-shirt.
I had one from last stream that we didn't talk about, and that is Unifi got hacked, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, tell us about that. Whew.
Yeah, so I'll put it in the news article. It was on Krabs, and there were some other people. So we're fuzzy on details, but for anyone who doesn't know, when I say Unifi, I meant the company's name is Ubiquity, but they make a bunch of different products. One of them is Unifi line, and they are marketed as like prosumer. I kind of think they're enterprise, but whatever. But they make a bunch of wireless gear. They make router switches. They also make a large variety of point-to-point wireless systems. Anyways, they're
I've got their stuff at my house. I've
got a ton of it. So the big thing here is that they, I guess, were compromised through a third party and exposed account information, supposedly hash and salted passwords. But for most people, generally speaking, Ubiquity's cloud offering is more of an authentication service than it is an actual hosting service, whereas you're actually logging on the devices that you own, so on and so forth. But the recommendation was to enable two-factor and change your password just in case. But
I like that. That's a good recommendation. So, but
they do have two-factor. But...
So I like their quote, and this gets into kind of how to handle an incident properly. They say, we are not currently aware of evidence of access to any database that host user data, but we cannot be certain that user data has not been exposed. This data may include your name, email address, one-way encrypted password. I don't know. Part of me, I hope that they honestly don't see any evidence and they're just doing this out of an abundance of caution, basically saying go in and change your passwords. I think that's probably the right way to handle an incident, is get out in front of it as quickly as you possibly can. You don't want to let this thing build up and then explode on you. Yeah, go ahead.
I think I have an idea for a new T-shirt. Change your password, enable GFA.
Perfect.
I love it. Yes, let's go with that.
That's not too bad.
It's not too bad at all. That's some good design. You were in the zone today.
I just
in the zone
today. Just came to you. Yeah.
When you got it, dude.
Yeah. It's the theme for 2022, 2021, 2020.
Yeah. The other thing too, you can also disable. People were talking about on Reddit and other places that you can just disable remote access. Like that's not a requirement for utilizing their products. It's just a feature that is there. So you don't have to enable remote access. The big problem would be is that if someone were to get one of these accounts, and let's say you have a whole network full of these things, maybe hundreds of devices, you immediately have kind of compromised all of their networking equipment, and you could change a couple maybe rules or policies to, get in. But you don't have to have this cloud feature enabled. So
that's good.
We got some.
Right, that's all I got.
We got some votes.
Go ahead.
For
You got
the
some
shirt.
comments?
Yeah, just some votes for the shirt. So I'm going to mock up some things.
Yeah.
And they want it
I
in
think
black.
It should be like almost like a generic, just a black shirt, straight white letters. Just boom, 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 boom. That's it. That's all the shirt says. It just keeps it simple.
That's it.
So,
all right. That's it for me.
All right.
Cool.
Ryan, are you ready to take us out, sir?
Sure thing. Let's have some
Do
music.
it, Ryan. Do it. Do it, Ryan. It's time to go cut some chicken.
I don't know. Last time you went and did that, I heard the dogs freaking out in the background. It's like, God damn, that's a big chicken.
And we're out. We ended on Big Chicken.
Big chicken.
Hey,